Good day, everybody. Welcome to our third installment of the Code Red series. My name is Gail Rutkowski, and I'm Executive Director of NASTRAC. I am delighted to introduce our panel today, and Mike Reagan from Transact Technologies will be moderating, as always. We have a great panel of some knowledgeable industry experts that are going to help share with us and hopefully calm all of our jitters over what's been going on in the transportation industry. So, Mike, take it away.
Gail, hey, thank you very much. And we have got an action-packed agenda for you here. And let me just jump right in here and welcome you to this, because what we're going to be sharing with you today, I think, is vitally important. And what we have here, let me just go full screen for you all, is our third installment in the Code Red forecast for 2021. Our session today is going to be focused on the ocean, air, and truckload markets. Now, for those of you that haven't joined us previously, you can listen to the Code Red webcast, part 1 and part 2, over at transact.com or at nastrac.org or at cscmp.org. And in there, we covered a lot more information about the truckload, LTL, and parcel sectors. And I will just tell you, I've heard from several people that attended those webcasts or listened to it, said the information was incredibly valuable. And in fact, we foretold some of the things that we are looking at today. And so our focus, like I said, is going to be on the ocean, air, and truckload market. I think it's important, just as a way of setting the table for you, to understand that the reason why we have hundreds on this call, as well as the hundreds that have joined us in the previous call, is because everybody is being affected by volatility. And that's, you can say it's COVID, whatever you want, but we are basically seeing business cycles that have occurred over 2-year, 3-year cycles occurring over 4 to 5 month cycles. Obviously, e-commerce has been huge. We're experiencing the bullwhip effect as companies evaluate their inventory models, sourcing strategies, and using the risk of potential disruptions. With respect to what we're seeing in the ocean market, we are expecting to see continued volatility, and we have some wonderful resources here. Peter Tirschwell heads up the Journal of Commerce's initiatives there and is an ocean expert. I've spoken with him on several panels. We've got Lori Fellmer, and she is Vice President at Bass International, and she is also the head of the NITL Ocean Committee. John Janson is the Senior Director for SanMar, which is a company that you'll learn more about. But one of the things we also have is Brent Hutto. With respect to the truckload overview, one of the things that we are looking at for a lot of different reasons that Brent is going to share with you, we are looking at 10 to 12% increases for the year. That could change based on the extent to which companies have more of their freight being tendered on a contract basis or the spot market. In last week's call, Brent shared some information about the market demand index that was positively stunning, and it'll help you understand why now more than ever, if you want to handle marketplace volatility, then you need to manage your transportation spend from the inside out. A little booklet available for you over at transact.com has talked about the fact that we are emphasizing the need for every company to have a transportation spend management plan. And the reason that is so important is because in these volatile environments, one of the things that has become quite apparent is that for companies that manage their transportation by the seat of the pants, they're going to see their costs go to a place where no one wants them to be. And so one of the things that we have offered in the previous webcast, can communicate or offer in this one as well, is suggestions for collaborating with your carriers, and that involves communicate, and communicate. It reminds me of one of my favorite lines from Cool Hand Luke, where the warden says to Paul Newman, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." And that's why now more than ever, we need to share plan, expectations, and requirements. And if you, one of the things that we did talk about for your core LTL carriers, it's imperative that you understand their network. And so one of the other things we're also encouraging you to do is, if you're looking to procure capacity at reasonable rates, it's imperative. John can talk about this, about what SanMar has done to give shippers advance notice for tendering freight. If at all possible, provide a schedule in advance, 7 to 10 days ahead of time. We can show you definitively that companies that provide their carriers with advanced lead time get better cost and also enhance their capabilities as a strategic shipper. The thing that I'm also going to emphasize here, that if you'll go back one slide there, Brent, the thing that I'm also going to emphasize there is that you need to communicate with your shippers, your suppliers, and your customers about what's going on in this environment. One of our customers that listened to this said that they sent it out to all of their suppliers as well as their customers as a great way of bringing everybody up to snuff on the conditions affecting the Code Red marketplace. So with that thought in mind, we're going to go in, and I've asked each one of our resources to take a couple of minutes to explain what's going on. I want to emphasize, if you do have questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A. We do have some questions that were submitted earlier in response to the emails that we sent out, and we'll make sure and address those. So Peter, bring us up to date on what the heck is going on in the ocean markets. When you talked last week, I found out about phantom bookings and blank sailings and lions and bears and tigers. Oh my. So Peter, take it away.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for including me on the webinar, and glad to be here with the panel, and hello to everyone who's watching the webinar today. You know, we find ourselves in a really unique place right now, where we've seen things not just over the course of this year, but in the conditions that we're experiencing right now that we've really never experienced. Normally this time of year, the holiday season goods have come through the ports. They've moved downstream in the transportation system. They're now in parcels being delivered to people's homes, and the ports are generally quiet. That is the opposite of the situation right now. The ports are overloaded. They're seeing growth rates versus prior years in the months of November, and certainly December is going to be the case as well, that are hugely in excess of not just last year, but what you would normally see this time of year. And it's to the point that we're going into a situation right now that I think is actually beginning to be quite worrisome. That actually conditions are not improving. They are deteriorating, and they very well might deteriorate even further. For example, we're heading now into the winter months. Well, the winter months typically, especially when snowstorms start to hit, that disrupts the transportation system. It always has, it always will. But we haven't experienced that right now because it's been the summer, then it was the fall, and now we're getting into winter. Another situation that is unprecedented that we're going into right now is the holiday season. Typically, dock workers, port drivers, transportation workers in the sort of port, maritime environment would be taking the time off over the holidays. Well, now they're not going to be. They will be doing that. They'll have the opportunity to do that. And so, will that cause a greater backup? And it couldn't happen at a worse time, because if you look, off the ports of LA and Long Beach, for the first time since there was the severe longshore labor dispute in 2014 and 2015, as of the other day, there were, I believe the number was, was between 15 and 20 container ships at anchor off the ports, waiting for berths to come in. And you got to ask, why are we seeing what we're seeing? Well, certainly the surge in volume has been beyond what anybody had predicted. And when I say that, I really mean it, because we did some research and we asked our economists within IHS Markit, one of the leading economic forecasting organizations in the world. Did any economist that you are aware of, anticipate when we were back in the lockdown, the surge of e-commerce and PPE-led cargoes that we would see pouring into the United States? The answer was no. Nobody saw it, because when we were down in the depths of the lockdown, it was Armageddon. We were staring into the abyss, and what happened, as we now know, was that the volume started to take off, and the ocean carriers, which had responded very, very quickly in withdrawing capacity in the face of the lockdown, which they had never done before. So it really showed, in a way, a coming of age of ocean carriers' ability to adjust capacity in the short term. Capacity was pulled from the market. It was brought back to the market. Even it was brought back over and above what it was. All ships are now deployed. The number of vessels that are idle now is very, very low. The charter rates on container vessels are through the roof. There is no capacity to be found. And then what we've started to see, and this is part of the situation that we're dealing with now, is that this, and it's a very overused, misused term, circulatory system. The flow of individual ocean containers around the world, they need to move as a group. They need to go to warehouses. They need to be unloaded. They need to be returned to the ocean carrier. The ocean carrier needs to give them to an exporter or ship it back to a point of origin empty. It's a flow that needs to occur, but that flow has been severely disrupted in part by COVID itself, because warehouses are unable to circulate and unload and return containers. So it's going to take months to come out of this, and for shippers who are dependent on ocean containers, it's going to be a rough several months, because for the first time in a long time, what we're going to see is a very elevated freight rate market carry into the contracting season. Typically, what has happened in the past is that you see the winter low, the volumes decline, the freight rates in the early part of the year are fairly weak, and then the annual contracts that are negotiated, for example, in the Trans-Pacific trade, are based on typically lower spot rates. Well, now the spot rates are highly elevated, reaching record levels, and increasingly we're seeing forecasts that are saying that this surge of imports that we're seeing right now is going to continue into the early part of the year, possibly beyond Chinese New Year, which means that the base off which the negotiations will occur for contracts is going to be a lot higher, and it's very possible that shippers are looking at substantial increases in annual contract rates over and above the contracts that were signed this year, which were signed during the depths of the lockdown.
When you say substantial increases, Peter, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you say substantial increases, give me a ballpark.
We've heard anything from 10, 15, 20, possibly 25% over next year on a contract basis.
On a contract basis.
Yeah.
So this spot market, how much spot market increases over contract? What are we looking at there?
Well, the spot market rates are the historic divergence between spot market and contract market rates right now. And for many shippers who have been trying to move their goods under their contract rates, the carriers have held them to very strict limits on that. Your weekly allocation divided by 50. But it's all going to come home to roost next year, where even there is no escape. There is no lower contract rate going to be the case, most likely. And
okay, so if you don't mind me interrupting, let me ask the question. So my question to every shipper that's on this call, and John, Lori, your shippers, how many of you have budgeted for 15 to 20% increase in your ocean rates in your 2021 budget? And the only reason I'm passionate about this, Gail and NASDAQ has been such a great supporter, along with CSCMP and Transact, when we held our Perfect Storm webcast that, John, you participated in. And what we found in 2018 was that by May, approximately 48 of the S&P 500 CEOs had cited supply chain issues as having a negative drain on earnings. Everybody's budget got blown out of the water in 2018. In your mind, Peter, is there a likelihood that we may see that scenario occur again? Because I'm talking to people and they say, yeah, our ocean rates are going to go up by 5 or 7%. John is shaking his head. Lori's shaking her head. And so, you've seen spot rate variances as much as 100% over contract rates, correct?
Yeah, or more.
Now, I hope everyone got that. Or more. And this is what shippers should expect to see at least through the first 6 months of 2021 and beyond.
Listen, it's not a pretty picture from a shipper perspective, and it's very, very different from what the last decade has looked like. So it's not like, oh, just the last couple of years that shippers have faced a very different environment, much, lower rates, no increases or very small increases year over year. In many places, ocean shipping reduction in contract rates year over year. And so therefore for shippers to get their heads around how dramatic a shift in the market is occurring, I think is not going to be so easy in many cases.
Okay.
But very interested to hear what John and Lori have to say.
Yeah, well, and we're going to jump to that, but I just want to emphasize one thing, Peter, because you mentioned it on the call last week. You're an industry veteran, one of the most respected experts in the ocean markets, et cetera. Journal of Commerce does a great job. In your entire life, have you ever seen what we're witnessing now?
Little bits and pieces of it over time. You've seen mini surges that backed up the ports for various reasons, but never anything. This has really morphed into a global
Right.
a global phenomenon, and
Yeah.
I've never seen. And
I mean, I'm on the board of a publicly traded truckload carrier that has a large dredge operation. I was out at the Port of Long Beach, in February. Saw this initial start of COVID, but I could go on, but I'll waste my effort here because we've got somebody that's much more attuned. Lori does a great job at Bass Pro, but she also does a great job representing shippers as her chairmanship of the Ocean Committee gives her access to a lot of the regulatory stuff. Lori, talk us off the ledge here.
I know.
What's going on?
Not so great before I started. Now I feel worse, Peter. Thank you. But in all seriousness,
And you haven't heard from John yet.
one of the things to really do my job is to handle the international transport for my company, BassTech International. One of the most important things I did all year is I read the JOC like it was nobody's business, and every other piece of information I could get, because it was such an unusual year. I've been doing this a long time. You can't predict it. And you just have to continue to expose yourself to the information that's out there and continue to make assessments and plans and change them weekly, monthly, because it is a very volatile situation. So as I say, I'm responsible for the international transportation for our company, procuring it and execution. And I would tell you that I think I've done a good job when I know that I get access to carriage for my company for all of our shipping needs, and when the costs are reasonable or at least predictable, because they can't always be reasonable. Some things are expensive. Getting access was the first challenge this year, and it was a day-by-day situation to keep an eye on it. It continues to be. The traditional way that we do this, we all know we have contracts with our carriers. We manage them, we balance it. Those avenues fell short this year. They continue to fall short. The best advice I could give is to manage those relationships to get the most out of them that you can. And that means, the sales reps for the steamship lines, they're not having a good year either. They're not happy in their jobs. Expand your network within your ocean carriers, expand your contacts, bring in more management, figure out how you can best work with them. And to your point, Mike, earlier, communicate. What you expected and what was the plan is not necessarily the way it's going to play out. So it's an ongoing dialogue to see how you can make the most use and be, working with your ocean carriers, which is your best bet, but it's not going to cover everything. So we do need to diversify how we get access to ocean carriage. And a couple of things I'll just throw out there is making use of shippers associations, working with strategic forwarders who are particularly strong, maybe in a lane where your carriers are falling short. Go on the spot market for those occasional things that you need, and know it's going to be a big ticket with a carrier other than your contract carrier, but you've got to add it into the mix as the conglomeration of your total ocean spend. And another novel idea out there are firms like NYSHEX, which I have not worked with, but I know people that have. For short-term contracts, it brings some surety of service, the way that they're structured. Again, you're paying for what you get, So you really have to put that blended cost into your ocean freight. So when you talk about budgeting for 2021, that's going to become a real reality of this blended cost. The other aspect of cost is a function of the year that we've experienced with all of this congestion. And that's the sort of incidental, unanticipated, unplanned cost that can be landside cost. And I'll just pick on detention because that's a big one in the news right now. And that has to do with the velocity of movement of a piece of equipment from the pier to your facility and back to the pier, whether you're bringing in an import load, stripping it down and returning the empty, or even if you're pulling an empty to load up for an export and deliver it back to the pier for an export shipment. These are things that are not moving the way they have historically and traditionally moved. Talk to your drayage carriers and get a detailed understanding of what they are going through, and understand that we need to get more deeply involved in those transactions. Talk to your warehouses, make sure that scheduling is really optimal so that we can really move that equipment with the velocity that we need to do. And where factors beyond our control, like operations at the terminals, like just general congestion, appointment systems, and so forth, really inhibit us, it is of real serious, there's a real serious reason to get involved, to document that stuff, because if you can't fix it, if you can't work with your drayage carrier to fix it, you can work with them to get the documentation you need to fight it. And the fighting after the fact can eliminate the cost by going to your ocean carrier or your terminal operator, as the case may be, to say, look, here are the facts of what happened. That bill can't be put on us. It's got to be changed. That's one outcome of that activity. But more than that, and as Mike was saying, I am involved with the NIT League. Whether you are affiliated with an organization, maybe an industry organization in your industry, a transportation organization, or if you're just on your own, doesn't matter how big or small you are. Believe me when I tell you, this is a regulated industry. The Federal Maritime Commission has been deeply involved. I mean, always, but for the past year and a half in a way that I haven't seen since 1998. In the activity of the ocean carriers. They want to hear from shippers. I think people are maybe intimidated. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a gigantic shipper. I don't have a lawyer. But you know what? They're interested in informal commentary as well. So if we find that the behavior within the supply chain is unreasonable, and we can document that, this is information to share because it is a serious concern for U.S. businesses. We need to be able to export. We need to be able to import to keep our businesses running and to keep our, the businesses' employees employed. So be this for your industry.
Yeah, no, that's great input. Can you just very briefly just talk, when you talk about the FMC, you've been doing such a great job of raising some of the issues, and maybe Peter can chime in as well. Is the FMC looking at things like detention, at things like blank sailings, things of that ilk? Is there any chance that we could see them step in under a new administration and actually do something constructive to assist shippers?
Well, I would argue they've done something constructive so far on demurrage and detention. After a long study, they put out an interpretive rule back in May. And the ironic thing was that as soon as the FMC said, okay, these are the rules that we adhere to. We believe that demurrage and detention are essential charges to incentivize shippers and to incentivize the efficient flow of goods through our ports, right? But as soon as they did that, well, May, what happened? There's nothing happening. So it was hard to gauge. And then we went into this weird Armageddon. And the fact is we need to continue to monitor whether or not the carriers and the participants are adhering to these principles. If the complaints aren't raised or the facts aren't raised, the FMC does not have a lot of well, I shouldn't say they don't have a lot of ability. They don't have a lot of motivation to do something. So your voice is so important. Do I think they're going to become more active? Yes, they continue to expand their investigation. Whether or not they go into something more concrete like rulemaking, hard for me to say, but if you listen to the comments of the commissioners, that is not off the table. They're recognizing that our
Okay,
1998, and maybe the time has come for a new look.
great. Laura, listen, that's fantastic stuff. We're going to move over to John. John is kind of unique in a lot of different ways, but works for a really cool company that almost no one's ever heard of, yet has some volume and numbers, and is probably one of the more insightful people, along with Lori and people like that we get to hang with. But John has a lot of ocean, but also a lot of air. So, John, if you could just briefly walk us through a little bit about SanMar and the ocean and the air aspects, that would be appreciated.
Well, sure, Mike, thanks for inviting me back on today. Lord, that was a tremendous job. Hopefully people were taking notes. SanMar is, again, it's a company a lot of folks haven't heard of. We're the nation's largest supplier of blank canvases or t-shirts, hoodies to the apparel industry. So we're one of the largest distributors of apparel, and we're a manufacturer of apparel. And all of our product goes into the decorated marketplace. So those people that put a logo on it, those people that become the school uniforms or the team uniforms that go out across the country. So while most people have not heard of us, we're one of a very significant importer, and we play very heavily into the package industry and most all facets of the supply chain. Yeah, I think just on ocean freight, one of the things that Peter and Lori both pointed out is you're going to see the contracting change, and shippers are going to have to go into contracting with a whole nother hat on their head. I think that, over the course of the truckload industry, we all started focusing on being a shipper of choice. How can we be more friendly to the shipping environment to make ourselves a more desirable customer? I believe that you're going to start seeing that shipper of choice come up in the ocean industry. And those people that are going to be a good steward of the carrier's equipment becomes more meaningful. If you can unload that container and give it back to them in a timely manner, you make yourself more meaningful. I think if your cargo is going to areas that they want cargo to go, all of a sudden, if you're a customer that's used to shipping inland all the way into points that they don't want the cargo, you're going to pay a heavier price. If you could transload and move them and give them their containers back, I think that's going to be more impactful. I think as you get into the contracting season this year, I think you'll look for shippers to try to tie commitment to pricing, so that if we're going to pay $1,000 peak service charge, what do I get for it? Am I actually going to get on the boat? And so I think going into the contracting season, it's going to be a whole different game. I think the carriers are going to look at you and say, how have you paid your bills? How have you been a steward of my equipment? And I think all of those things are going to add up to being able to make yourself a more desirable customer. And I think you're going to have to put a little bit of a sales hat on and sell why you should be a good customer for them. And if we're not educating our CEOs right now and our CFOs that costs are going to go up, they're going to go up. And I think, Peter pointed out that the line's been drawn, and the new starting point isn't going to be in that sub $1,000 range. They're going to start at the top, and it's going to be painful, I think. So.
Okay, John, walk us through the air market. What's happening on the air market?
Sure. Well, I think everybody that gets a package delivered realizes that the parcel industry and the air marketplace right now it's crazy. It's like nothing that we have ever seen. You're looking at the fact of all the national news of the major carriers here in the United States are putting capacity valves on shippers. And so for the first time, there's people that aren't getting product picked up. And they're looking at it saying, those your volume that you used to give us, we're not going to pick it up today. And, we may not pick it up tomorrow. And you're seeing that what the carriers have done, though, is paying off. because their on-time delivery percentages are just going through the roof. They're all in the high 90s during the busiest peak season. I think that really the new CEO of UPS, and when Carol Tomei came on board, she launched a message to the industry. She said, we're looking for better customers, not bigger customers. And UPS as a company is backing that up. I mean, as they're looking at the type of customers they want and the type of customers that FedEx want, they're out there picking those customers. And there's a lot of people that are sitting on the sidelines right now, not able to move product. And if you look at the air marketplace specifically, there has been so much capacity taken out of the international marketplace because passenger flights aren't flying. That's normally where all of your cargo flies. So it means that air freight rates are going up and staying up. You're looking in the United States, UPS added 8 new 767s to this last week to move vaccines. And the vaccines are going to take priority over everything else. And so if you're a next day air shipper, that's going to be a problem. I think your volume that you're going to be able to put in the marketplace over the next several weeks and months is going to follow behind vaccines. If you're an international shipper, same thing. You're going to be looking for going out to try to contract for charters or share charter space to be able to move product into the United States because the capacity just isn't going to be there.
John, we're going to move to Brent here in just a bit, but there are a couple of questions that I want to throw open to the group before we move into the truckload market. First of all, with respect to the COVID issue, one of the things that I think is really underappreciated that you touched on, and I think it's incredibly important for folks to understand, is that when you have reduced passenger flights, that affects cargo capacity in a huge way. And so when you're starting, and that capacity is not going to come back simply on the basis of great cargo. There has to be a passenger return associated with that. Now, having said that, where I'm going with this, and this is something that we talked about in our pre-call, and we can all chime in, with COVID coming out, now with the release of the vaccine, what should shippers expect to see over the next 3 to 6 months in the air markets? And does it have an impact, Peter and Lori, on the ocean side as well? John, if you want to take a look at that.
Certainly it's going to impact the air markets, as depending on where the origin of the vaccines are coming from, you're going to see the international space go. And as we put Chinese New Year on top of it, air capacity from Central Asia is going to be very expensive. U.S. space.
When you say very expensive, that means, help me understand, 5%, 10%, 100%?
You're again looking at that, you're going to see 15 to 20 to 30% increases. And again, if the capacity is even there to be able to move it domestically, FedEx and UPS are making huge commitments to vaccine movements. And once it hits there, it goes down the next level. I mean, look at all these, the most recent vaccine has to be held at an unbelievably cold temperature. That's going to impact the entire cold chain of the United States, because there has to be carriers that can move that. And especially as you get closer to the last mile, all of that is going to impact shippers across the country.
Okay, Peter, your thoughts?
Well, I think without question, the vaccine demands are going to place huge burdens on the supply chain. I'm not prepared yet to be able to say specifically what the impact will be, because we have spoken to some of the largest freight forwarders just off the record talking to us, who have said that when it comes to their managing the supply chains for their international customers, they believe they will manage around the vaccine transport. And I've said that very confidently, and we're not doing it sort of in an on the record type, browbeating way, or, to try to sell anything. I mean, and so Mike, it's to me, it's a little premature to really know exactly how what the vaccine impact is going to be from my point of view.
Okay, one question that did come up, and maybe Lori, you and Peter can address this, and John as well, from Andy Gillespie, a buddy of mine. He said now that there are only 6 global carrier groups left, and they are acting together, no longer battling each other hard on market share, will this bring regulatory actions on their use of the 3 major trade alliances? Whew.
Well,
Go ahead, Peter.
yeah.
Have
Well,
it.
hey, Andy, how are you? Good to see you on the call with us. What I think is that something fundamentally changed this year, and the regulators are at the very, very early stages of what will be a reaction of some kind. The antitrust immunity that the carriers had enjoyed in the U.S. and in Europe, that's all a thing of the past. Alliances were allowed on the basis of being capacity management schemes only. However, the question that was raised this year through the carrier actions are the capacity management allowances that the alliances have, were they able to utilize those to influence the market, as opposed to just being a group of carriers sharing assets, an operational agreement only, versus actually being able to utilize those agreements for the purposes of impacting the market. And so therefore the alliances have to be viewed from a different regulatory perspective. And as we all know, when it comes to regulation, it takes oftentimes years for regulators to react to a changing environment. But I think that there will be a reaction, although I think it's too early to tell exactly what it will be.
Lori, your thoughts?
No, I fully agree. And if you listen to what the FMC is saying, they've made it clear they've increased their reporting requirements with the alliances so that they can review their documentation more frequently and I think in greater depth, because they recognize there is something that requires closer oversight. The capacity issue is one. There's discussions also about their involvement in chassis management in the United States. There have been a couple of lawsuits or complaints, depending on which you're looking at, and those are being taken seriously by the FMC and being allowed to move forward. Specifically, it's about the carrier involvement in chassis management, the ocean carrier involvement in chassis management. And I think, there's just a real recognition that there's a big discrepancy, imbalance of power, and
Okay.
not a lot of
Just a quick question, and then we need to move to Brent. But just actually 2 questions. Does the threat of regulatory action concern the ocean carriers?
I've never seen that work in the past.
That's not the answer I was hoping for, Peter or John.
Well, I think, to be frank, the FMC gave a very pretty specific set of guidelines for demurrage and detention practices in May. And granted, it's been an unusual year, but I think that they are I can't say what they think, but I think we're all disappointed that the carriers have not taken it to heart and reacted.
And Mike, I would say in general that what we will see is a heightened period of regulatory scrutiny and involvement in the ocean container markets. I think we're entering into that phase now, and it's not going to be just the US, it's going to include Europe. It's also going to include places like China. And so I think it's going to be a process that's going to play out over a couple of years.
Well, John has mentioned this, and then I just want to ask a question, then we're going to go to Brent. But, John, you had mentioned the fact that you felt that the Chinese government was going to get involved to some extent, and there the regulatory process is a little bit different than ours. They would be, it's going to affect their ability to export if they don't step in and bring it. John, just give me 30 seconds on that.
Well, the Chinese government's, their regulatory arm stepped in and looked at 2 of the largest carriers that are Chinese based and just kind of said, listen, we need to control the rate of the increases that are coming because of the potential impact of goods being exported from China. And they definitely have more influence over their carriers than we have in the United States.
Yeah, so you know what they say, pigs get fed, hogs go to market, but given the fact that pork is a sensitive issue in China, we're going to move on. Unfortunately, you know, I don't know about you, but if you're an ocean shipper, an ocean air shipper, one question that did come up from Alejandra, at a friend of ours there, is there a COVID factor in terms of rate increase? In other words, is there an increase in freight cost associated with the COVID situation? Don't need a lengthy answer, John. Yes or no? If so, how much?
I don't think directly tied to that. I don't think you would tie it specifically to COVID.
Peter?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, because one of the reasons why the rates are so high is because the capacity has been reduced. And one of the reasons why the capacity has been reduced is that containers aren't circulating as freely as they have in the past. And
Amen.
why that is happening is because longshoremen aren't showing up to work because they don't want to catch COVID. And within warehouses, you have social distancing that's not allowing for the turning of containers at the speed that you used to have it. So I think there is a connection, and it's not well understood, but it's definitely there.
Lori? Your thoughts, Lori?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is impacting every organization as far as staffing goes. But I think that we've seen a new normal because of the way things have responded.
And I would just encourage everyone that's listening to this call to listen to what John said, be good stewards of the carrier's equipment. And I think in years past, they wouldn't care. But I will say, John, you shared a story with me with one of your truckload carriers that couldn't provide, you know, freight, you know, a large customer supplier to you because they had run out of trailers. And the reason they're running out of trailers is because the trailers aren't getting turned at the customer's facilities nearly. And Peter, there's issues with chassis and containers, and I could go on and on, but like I said, let's take a breath here and let's talk about something much more calm, where there are no issues, where capacity is abundant, rates are constrained. And I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Brent Hutto at Truck Stop, and he shared some numbers last week with me that I still can't get out of my head, but I don't want to spoil his thunder. Brent, tell us what the heck is going on in the truckload, and if you can bring in the LTL sector, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, certainly I'll do my best. First off, it's not a vacation on a calm lake right now. I can tell you that. That's appreciate the setup, but happy to be on with CSEMP and NASTRAC, and certainly with Mike, with you and Transact, and then with John, Lori, and Peter. You know, we're, as you can tell, above all four of us, we really just want to communicate, how do we get through this together? And this is because transportation freight is connected. And so Lori talked about it, Peter talked about it, John talked about it, about how collaboration is going to be more important. I know everybody uses the word, but it's going to become more and more important as this marketplace gains more and more in pressure. And so we at Truck Stop, we're a little different. We're about 100 million loads within the 750 million plus load truckload marketplace. We're a truckload freight marketplace. We have two different types of users of our marketplace software. Predominantly they're carriers, really small carriers like 1 to 10 trucks, and then brokers anywhere from the smallest to the largest. And so we do business with about 65,000 carrier companies and about 10,000 brokers. So we're a giant collection of information in a marketplace. And that's why I've got some slides to show, because I think in order to do them justice, a visual is one of the best ways to do it. So let me bring this up here. And all right, so what you're looking at on the screen is, let me go down one, sorry about that.
While you're doing that, Brent, everyone should know that the replay will be available, and we'll be happy to share any and all slides. Okay, so go ahead, Brent.
I got a couple slides here. I'm gonna go fairly quick through them so we could talk about it. You asked us all to talk about what's going on. Well, first off, the market is at an incredible peak, and it's likely to stay at this peak for a while and stay there for at least another quarter. And there's surprises everywhere in this marketplace, as we've all talked about, and there's not necessarily surprises from a shipper standpoint that's really good on the pocketbook, but these surprises, there's so many going on, it's hard to keep track of a lot. So I like to start with this slide that you're looking at right here, which is the truckload forecast. It says not annualized. That's the graph on the left. This is a gain or a loss in that quarter. So you see in the second quarter, or the third quarter of second quarter of 2020, where we had the largest drop in American history. The largest drop. Well, not surprisingly, we had the largest increase in American, this is all US, in American history the next quarter. Now these are gains. These are not nets. In other words, so this was a drop, and the next quarter that was an increase. The fourth quarter, you see they went up again. Well, that's not a drop. That's an increase on the pressure that's already in the marketplace. I like to show this because this is from my good friend on the world, one of the best economists in all of transportation, Noah Perry. These are aggregates. So you see the tremendous pressure in the third quarter. Well, there's more pressure in the fourth quarter, as we're all experiencing. And guess what 2021 looks like? More pressure, more pressure, more pressure, more pressure. Not quite as much, but it's on top of a marketplace that's already got a tremendous amount of pressure. And I'll talk about those numbers in just a second. The graph on the right is the current forecast of US truckloads. So you notice that we had a drop in the second quarter of 2020. That's all due to the quarantine. And then you see this steady increase. You notice it's not flattening. It's going to continue to increase. What's that going to do? It's going to put more pressure on the system. Let me go to this slide. This is a really good, this is spot load market. I talked about truck stops marketplace. Spot load availability. You noticed, I want to take your eyes to one important thing that everybody always goes back to, 2018. Mike, you hit on it in the beginning. 2018, everybody talks about, wow, 2018 was the most difficult market because of capacity constraints ever in its history. Well, guess what 2020 has done? It has exceeded that. So you see where you got a high point, but you don't have it for very long. You have it for about 4 weeks. We've had a high point for 16 weeks. It's been incredible. I'll show you those numbers. I see you covering it out like, oh my goodness.
Is this the part where we offer Xanax to our viewers?
I do believe you, if you're really that concerned, you might want to pass a few out. But I think the thing to do is, this is the one that really gets me. And this is why this is why I encourage shippers to, it is so important to look at all the market data. Look at ocean, look at air, look at every single piece of every part of it, because you mentioned the market demand index. The highest I had ever seen in its history was in the 60s to 70s. It hit almost 120 about 12 weeks ago.
Time out.
I know. No, but
John, wait, John. Lori, have you ever seen?
Hey, before you say this, this is where it gets crazy, and this is where Mike almost fell out of his chair when I said it to him. The balance where it's even between negotiations and carriers and brokers is 30, and it was almost 120, and it has stayed at plus 80s, 90s, and 100s for more than a quarter. This is why things are so difficult right now. Now look, market demand, you'll notice two things about these charts. They're very similar. Their big drop when it went way down and there were truckers protesting in Washington, D.C., huge incline, the biggest incline we've ever seen in the history of the spot market. We've been watching these things for 25 years, not a couple of years, 25 years. So you'll notice that the market demand and the rates came up the same. We've had more than 15 weeks of rates at $2.45 average, $2.40 average in the spot market. That is unparalleled in our marketplace. It's so important to look at the data because when you look at the overall marketplace, and you talked about would the COVID-19 vaccine affect the marketplace? We believe it will. You've got these large players that are going to be the ones transporting it for the most part because they have the networks and the systems to be able to do it. I mean, you look at the impressive things that you have to accomplish in order to be able to transport them. The average lock, stock, and barrel refrigerated hauler is not going to be able to do it. You got to have the systems to be able to do it. Well, if they're going to be using their capacity to move the vaccine, they're going to continue to reject some of their other contract freight. And guess where that comes to? The spot market, just like on these slides. And so it's super important. This is why when I'm talking to shippers, one of the most important things I always talk about is know your data on the marketplaces that give you, especially on the marketplaces that give you the biggest headache. And I know, look, it's our marketplace. We try to run it as efficiently as possible. The spot market can be a headache because it's volatile. It's all economically market driven. And so it's up and down. One of the cool things about looking at data, we talked about the transfer loads is we have something unique on Truckstop that's really cool. You can see how much freight's going in and out of a destination. And if you'll look on this, I pulled this morning. If you'll notice on the left-hand side, it says decision tools. The loads to truck ratios in Illinois to anywhere, you've got 5,371 loads to 58 trucks, or 92 loads per truck. That's going to be an expensive piece of transportation to move, Mike. And so that's really what I look at. You said when we were talking about this, you said, well, what can shippers do in response to the conditions? Well, John mentioned it, Peter's mentioned it, and I know Lori feels the same way. You've got to create these relationships with the people that are mandatory in being able to move your product with the carrier. You've got to create these relationships, these more collaborative relationships, and to create efficiency. And to me, I know this, that only about 14% of all shippers in North America, and there's about 4 million, can move their own freight. It all comes back to really the technical connection and really investing in the technical connection in order to be able to move freight efficiently for all players, so it can move as rapidly as it needs to. And that's what I see that as probably one of the biggest solutions that a shipper needs to look at. Is, I know it's painful right now, but I would say one of the best things you can do as a shipper is invest in some technology to be able to connect better. Look at John shaking his head. Invest in some technology to connect better with your providers, because I mean, we all need each other. So I'll stop there. And to me, that's probably one of the biggest suggestions. Know your data, connect with technology, and just build those relationships that create the collaboration that you need.
But before you go, one of the opportunities, a question that Randy Detmer asked, great question, was the use of data analytics. And, what tools are there out there? One of the things that I just will express a personal bias here, and that is, one of the benefits of 2018 was that it got transportation and supply chain into the boardroom.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we have talked about when we did the CSCMP with John was on my panel there, did a great job, and some others, was grab a seat at the table. So here's the question. Are there some data analytic tools out there, Brent, that can help people? Basically, you say, know your data, invest in technology, build relationships. Is there a data analytical tools, what are out there to help shippers decode this stuff?
Right. Well, certainly through, and I'll stop sharing here. Certainly through our product, we offer products to shippers to see the data in the marketplace. We have a free one called the Spot Market Insights that anyone can sign up for and understand the historic look back and then most importantly, the 7-day look back on the entire spot marketplace. And I would say invest to look at any type of rating product that you can look, and you can find the rates in the marketplace, because rates and truck capacity are the same word. They're the exact same word. When you look at the rate, you'll understand how capacity is moving. And there's several other places out there that you can find data. But I would say look at where you can find rate data on spot market and the contract marketplace. We have a great relationship with providers like FTR Intelligence.
Right.
We have a relationship with FreightWaves. They have an excellent product in their SanMar product that looks at the overall marketplace, a contract and spot. There's other providers. I know that Transport Futures through Noah Perry, the economist I talked about earlier. I know you do an excellent job in analyzing data. There's groups that actually analyze it to look at, to give you an overall view of what you're looking at. And there's also products that you can actually take, and you were talking about bid season, we're carrying a heck of to Peter mentioned this, a ton of momentum into bid season. I can only imagine what a shipper's trying to go through right now, who's on the low technology end, wondering how in the world am I going to do bid season this year when you consider the pressure that's in the marketplace.
And then that brings up a point that I think, and I would be curious, I'm just going to throw this out as a general thing here. We have talked about in previous webcasts that what has changed in the environment today is that the carriers, and I say this across the board, air, parcel, ocean, truck, LT, you name it, they've got great data. Just like the shippers have invested, in Oracle and all the ERPs, and the carriers have been investing. They now know cost on a customer by customer basis. So that is fundamentally different. The second point that we pointed out is that the carriers have learned from the ocean carriers, and Peter and John and Lori, I'd be interested in this. The ocean carriers proved that if I restrict my capacity rather than continue to bring new ships to market, I can make a lot more money. And John, just as you were saying with Carol down at UPS, we want better customers, not bigger customers. She also said we want quality earnings as opposed to quantity earnings. You know, these dynamics, if you don't understand these dynamics heading into a bid season, you know, help me understand the ramifications. If you could take just 30 seconds, Peter, is that an accurate assessment of where we're at today with the carriers having better data? And, you know, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the ocean carriers are not particularly known for having high quality data, but they're getting a lot better. And some of the leading ocean carriers now know very, very well what their costs are, and are, you know, as time has gone on and as the order book has declined and as the carriers have consolidated, and as the remaining carriers have coalesced around 3 alliances, and those alliances are able to exercise capacity management much more effectively than in the past. Certainly, the carriers are in a stronger position than they were, which means, getting back to what John was saying earlier, which I think is an important point, and Lori, you were saying this also, is becoming a shipper of choice in ocean. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And you're right, Lori. You have to go beyond your sales rep. You have to build relationships within these organizations. You have to build relationships at origin. There's a lot of shippers I know who go to China and meet the Costco team in Shanghai or Xiamen or Ningbo, and sit with them and have dinner with them. And why are they doing that? Because those are the people who are going to get your containers on the ship. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, then, you know, you're more likely to get left behind. So actively managing your relationships with the carrier, I think, is something that is going to become really, really important.
Okay. Very briefly, you know, I'm going to change gears here because there is a question here that Joe Lombardo, my buddy, asked, and that is, does your sourcing strategy change? Lori, John, maybe answer this. Does your sourcing strategy change based on the mode? So, for example, am I going to handle my sourcing for ocean different than truck? Or are there some generic principles that Brent has brought up that apply across all modes? John?
I think that the single biggest one is, when you come down to, you have to understand the characteristics of your freight, and then understanding the characteristics of what your business is and how does that align with what carriers are finding desirable. I'll use one example. In the parcel industry right now, if you are adding more stops, more packages to a carrier stop, you're desirable. If you're adding more stops to their route, you're not. And you better understand your characteristics, and you need to understand how it fits what the carriers are looking for.
Okay, Lori?
I think what John says is completely true. And that is true across all modes. If I'm looking for, you know, we are a smaller shipper, so it's important to find service providers to whom your business is going to be important and useful. Yeah.
Okay. Brent, did I miss anything?
No. To me, I just go back and encourage again that I think you need to see your providers, if you're a shipper, as more of a partner than a vendor. And if you do that, then solutions can be found, because you're really trying to do what is beneficial, not just for yourself, but for all parties that are necessary in the process. Okay,
there's 2 other questions, and then I want to close us out. Somebody asked, you know, with congestion being so bad at LA and Long Beach, are the same issues there at Oakland and Seattle? And, you know, one of the other things that I was offered to go up to Prince Rupert Sound. I think they have a beautiful port up there. Is it just locally to LA and Long Beach, or are all ports experiencing some level of congestion? Peter?
LA Long Beach is experiencing the most severe congestion at the moment of any gateway in North America. However, we're starting to see signs of congestion building at other gateways. And so I was actually just typing an answer to that question. And what I was recommending was that even if really noticeable congestion hasn't materialized at other gateways, it should be monitored very, very carefully right now for signs of delays.
Okay, and then Brent, you could perhaps answer this, but for those of you that want more information on this particular question, Brent, I'm going to really emphasize to go to Transact and or CSCMP, NASTRAC, download the first two Code Red webcasts because we talked about the driver situation. We still are seeing a driver shortage, according to Eric Fuller, 150,000 or more, and it's likely to get worse rather, because of the issue of chronological age of the drivers. Plus, people are saying with COVID and things like that, it's just the health issues are too significant. Is there anything else that can be done to address the driver shortage? And I will say, if you're taking a look, one of the things we highlighted in the Code Red webcast, Brent, FFE is now going to pay their drivers 25% more. Eric said that they're going to be paying their drivers more, 20%. It may happen in multiple tranches. But aside from pay, is there anything else that we're missing here to bring more drivers into the market?
Yeah, I think Covenant and Schneider also said the same things about increasing pay, but then that helps for a retention standpoint. I don't know the answer to that. That has been, I entered this market in 1998 and we had a driver shortage of like 100,000 drivers. And guess what's 20 years plus later? We got 100,000 driver shortage, and the freight is only density is only going to increase. So to me, I think it goes back to a couple of things. We did an analysis back in the 2015 surge that was going on, or 2014 surge that was going on, and we did on our data. We found that we didn't have a capacity shortage. We didn't have a driver shortage. We had a truck location shortage. The biggest issue here is that the trucks are not in the right location to be able to move them most efficient. Just like you were talking about not having chassis to get back to the ports, so you can, or empty containers to get back to the ports so they could go fill them in China and bring them back. Same problem in trucking. And this comes back to, and I know we're a technology platform, but I can tell you there's not 100,000 American citizens looking to line up to be truck drivers. All right, that's even though ATA is doing their best to try to get intra-state drivers to be able to haul freight, that's still going to be a long path. To me, the most important thing we can do is find technical connections that speed this up and create efficiency where you got the more right trucks in the right place all the time. And that happens through everybody. I mentioned before, shippers, carriers, brokers, all having technology that communicates together on a conjoined platform. But to me,
I apologize. What you've talked about is fit. There was another question that Kathy brought up. She said, I've been getting shipments from Texas to overnight shipments, John, with no problem via FedEx, 2-day shipments from Texas to Wisconsin. She said that's probably going to end in the near future, Kathy. You're obviously on Santa's good list, so stay there and hopefully good things will happen. But let me just close out before, first of all, I want to say thank you very, very much to our panelists. But that has begged a question that we are passionate about, and Gail and I and CSCMP are also passionate about, that we are going to look at here, and that is, if I could bring this up, let me just back up here a second, folks. Let me stop share here, and let me just close this out because it is extremely important, and that is the need to, and I won't go to full screen, but build a transportation spend management plan. And the only reason I bring this up for you folks is because right now the issue that's going to get exposed is that you are, for a lot of people, they're managing transportation by the seat of their pants. And there is no basic set of rules there that is guiding them in terms of how they choose to run their transportation and supply chain areas. And so, John mentioned that, costs going up. I just want to basically end this out by asking a couple of questions that I asked resources, and that was specifically, are you taking a look at your budgets for 2021? If you're, budgeting 3%, 5%, 7% for ocean, truckload, air, you may want to go and revisit that. And what I found from talking with CEOs and presidents through the organizations that I'm a part of, they don't mind getting bad information. They hate getting surprises. Mm-hmm. They may not like bad information, but they hate surprises. And so when I say to people, with cost going up, cost goes up means you potentially could go out unless you've shared the reasons for that and your strategy for managing that. So with that thought in mind, I know we ran a little over. I want to apologize. Did I miss anything? We'll do a final roll call. Peter, final thought.
No, just really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. You know, a lot of the subjects that we talked about today, we're going to be going into great depth on at the TPM, which is going to be held virtually from February 23rd through, February 25th through March 3rd. So a lot of detail on the ocean environment from every conceivable angle.
The TPM it's an unbelievable conference. For those that haven't been there, you and Bill Cassidy and the JOC team, that's my shameless plug. You're welcome. But anyway,
Thank you.
Lori, very briefly, did I miss anything?
No.
Okay. John?
No, good job, Mike.
All right, Brent.
Yeah, I think the wisest counsel you gave was look at the market, understand where the ups and downs, and if you're a mover of transportation freight, inform your leadership on what's going on, and you'll ensure that you have a job moving forward, and you'll be efficient what you do. So
That's the old adage, if you're not planning, you're planning to fail type stuff. So there is one thing I want to make sure we don't miss out, and I'll turn it over to you, Gail. This being December 15th, 10 days away from now, Santa's he's kind of coordinating with UPS and FedEx as well in case he gets overloaded. I've been told there is no COVID at the North Pole. It doesn't like it up there. So I can close out this webcast by wishing everyone either a happy Hanukkah or a very, very Merry Christmas. And we'll have a great 2021, and we'll continue to keep you all informed with strategies about how you can manage through that. Gail, over to you.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to our panelists. What a great sharing of information, and I know our listeners appreciated it as much as I did. I'd like to echo Mike's thoughts and wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and hopefully a very happy 2021. We all deserve it. So have a good day, everybody, and we'll be back soon.
Hey, take care, folks. Bye-bye.